Hi there, villagers. Today I am interviewing my American friend Jane. She is married to a Brit. They now live back in the USA, but they did live here for a little while. They have a homeschooling journey experience to talk about and the pros and cons of being married to a foreign national. Hopefully you will enjoy this little chat with Jane.
How about now?
Yes, and it was me. I did it. It's my end.
Okay.
You have to have so many settings set for internal speakers and some for the recording side of the software that I don't do it often enough to remember which way round it is, and even my notes don't make any sense when I've actually come to press the button.
Yes.
So, here we go. I can hear you, you can hear me, and I appear to be recording, which is always, yes, I'm definitely recording.
That's a good thing.
Well, yes, because the lady I interviewed a couple of weeks ago that will be going out on Sunday, she's, bless her, had to do it twice because none of the recording had sound, and we were effectively just sitting there staring at each other, mouthing things. So,
oh dear.
But we're okay. We're sorted now. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. After some slight...
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
After some slight technical hitches. But we've got there in the end, so that's the important bit.
Yes.
So, have you got a drink and are you all settled?
I am almost all set. I had to really quickly make some Valentine cookies because, we are actually following the same school schedule as you are.
Okay.
Thanks to Paul. But my kids still have their homeschool group meetup that they have most Wednesdays today.
Which is how they're able to do this.
It makes it really easy for me to do this.
Excellent.
But they're having a Valentine's Day party. So I need to actually no, I was gonna do cherries. I need to get Don't rush.
No, it's fine. Take your time. I guess the answer to how you manage to do everything is you've got 50 things to do all at the same time.
Yes, pretty much. I'm trying to think through what do I still have to do. So, yes.
It is tricky, isn't it, trying to get it all done while they're out of the house or asleep?
Yes, it is. And plan everything all at the same time.
And in our case, dealing with the time difference to make sure that we're all in the same place at the same time.
Yes, indeed. And not blinding you with a light behind me. All right.
Have you written any notes? Do you need to have them?
I have. I printed out your questions and I answered them.
Good. Well, we don't need to bother then.
Just to make things easier.
Just to make things easier. Well, that's good because the number when Charlotte interviewed me, we were using my phone to do the filming, and that's actually where my answers were. So I had to do it all from memory, and some of the answers are the same.
Yeah.
So, Jane, you are obviously American. And
yes.
You are now back living in the state of your birth, aren't you?
I am. I was born in New Mexico. New Mexico is a land of confusing weather.
Sounds like it.
Because while it is an arid state, we do actually get the occasional massive thunderstorm. And it really does play play havoc with everybody here, because a lot of the time people don't know how to handle rain, because all we get that they're used to is dry weather. So
yeah, it's a funny business, isn't it? Like snow here, because it doesn't snow very often. The slightest little flurry, everybody's like, "Oh, I've got to go home. I might not make it if I leave it any later," as though it's an international crisis. And yet, I lived on the Canadian border in upstate New York for 6 months, and I saw a shocking amount of snow for a British person to see, and I don't intend to see any more. I'm quite fine with the amount of snow I've had, thank you.
And I know from pictures from Mum that you have had a bit of snow this winter.
Yes. It's now trying desperately hard to be spring. But it keeps having a sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing. But it'll get there in the end. Okay, let's make a concerted effort with our questions then. So, do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother and an older sister.
So you're the baby of the house.
I am.
Are they still local to you? Do you get to see them?
I get to see my brother fairly frequently. He's kind of in between homes at the moment. He's spending a lot of time down here. He does have a job down here, but his wife is living in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
And his son spends time with his mother, who lives in Wyoming. So first marriage.
Yeah.
And so he spends time here and in Colorado and in Wyoming. It's a rough time for him. And my sister lives all the way over in Rhode Island.
Oh, that is a decent distance then, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's all airports and airplanes and stuff then?
Yeah. Apart from talking with her every once in a while, I haven't seen her in 4 years.
Wow. And how many children do you have?
I have 3. I've got Daniel, and he's 10 going on 11 in March. And I've got Abigail, who is turning 8 in 3 days' time.
Ooh, happy birthday, Abigail.
Thank you. And then I have Taya, who is going to be 4 in June.
And we've met them all now, because we saw you last summer.
Live
and in person. So, and you're homeschooling all of them?
All of them. Yeah. It's going really, really well.
Good.
And it's much better than our public schools.
I have lots of Americans who say much the same.
I'm not surprised. Things are getting worse and worse. And unfortunately, New Mexico is one of the worst states for education.
Oh, really?
As it is. It really is. It's one of the poorest states in the whole United States, and there's a lot of turmoil happening politically and in the society and the culture. There's just a lot of turmoil happening, and the government has introduced certain educational ideas that a lot of parents are disgusted with.
Right.
And they started doing that a couple years ago. And it was, well, actually, no. They've been doing it for probably 2, maybe 3 decades.
Mm.
But just, it was so, the introduction of it was so small that it was kind of slipping underneath parents' radar.
Right.
But over the last couple of years, they've been really, really stepping it up. And we pulled our kids just in time.
Were they originally at school?
Sorry?
Were they originally at school?
Both Daniel and Abby had a year in public school.
Mm-hmm.
And they both got a little bit of some stuff that we're not thrilled about, but none of the stuff that they're teaching now about gender identity and such.
Yeah. So in amongst all your homeschooling and running your
Yes.
house and baking Valentine's cookies whilst trying to talk to me and all the rest of it, what do you do for you?
I enjoy something that helps me relax is being able to sit down and do some sort of sewing or craft work like that.
And that's why we're friends.
Knitting, crocheting. Yeah. And sometimes I just enjoy sitting down and reading.
Yeah. I'm struggling at the moment to stay awake long enough to read, but I am enjoying having an Audible subscription and having people read it to me. So, how long have you and Paul been married?
We have been married coming up for 17 years.
And where did you meet? Because Paul is British.
We met online. Paul he'd just gotten a job coaching football in America. And as he would be spending time in America, he wanted to find a local church that he could go to, make sure that he kept his faith going.
Yeah. And
so he went onto a forum looking for a church. As it turns out, I also was looking for a church. I actually I wasn't a born-again Christian at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for some Christian friends, though, and for people that believed in God. And so I was also looking for a church, and we just got talking, and the messaging grew and got more, and we fell in love.
And you obviously met at some point physically.
Yes. We started talking on February 4th of 2007, and Paul flew out to actually meet me in person June of that year. And he proposed 11 days later.
Wow.
So
17 years of marriage is not a bad record, is it? I just went on this forum to find a church.
Yes.
3 kids later.
Yes, indeed.
Do you have any secrets to a long marriage? Being in the same country obviously helps.
Yeah. See, I wrote something down about this. Did I write down? Prayer is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Praying, not just praying that, oh God, please fix my husband in this because he's doing this and it's really annoying me. That's not the prayer I'm talking about. The prayer I'm talking about is the prayer of, please God, soften my heart and change me, and then you can deal with what my husband is doing.
Yeah.
Because it's so often the challenges that we have are more if we have a soft heart, we can work through any challenges a lot easier. And then just always seek to work on communication.
Which I would imagine has its slight complications being married to a British fella. Do you have any funny examples of really bad communication with what is effectively a foreign national?
Actually, not for us.
No.
It's been something. I think one of the benefits that Paul and I have had is because the way that our relationship started was we started with communicating. Just, I mean, our initial communication were messages on a form, so they were all written. And they quickly moved from, we went from, our initial messages were like 3 paragraphs long, big paragraphs. And then they grew more, and it got to the point where the messages were too long for the forum, so we exchanged emails. And when we started sending emails, they tended to be 2 to 3 pages long, and we'd send 2 to 3 emails a day. And they weren't just fluff, they were actually conversations, proper conversations. And so because of that, I think our ability to communicate with each other has always been, we've never really had cultural communication struggles. Man-woman,
but not
communication struggles, yes, because men communicate differently than women. Men have, how a man can have a nothing box, a box where, or a time when you'll ask them, what are you thinking about? And they'll say nothing, and they really are thinking of absolutely nothing. And vice versa, Paul has no idea what it's like to have, one of the books that we've read made the analogy of a woman's brain being like a computer, where you have lots of windows open all at the same time, and you have programs running in the background, and you have, added to that, you have pop-ups that just kind of, here's another something to think about.
Open this tin opener? Yeah.
And so the communication differences in that we've had to work through, and that's something that obviously every married couple, if they've been married for any length of time, they'll have to work through.
Do you find any advantages to being married to a Brit?
A lot. Before I met Paul, I was actually quite close-minded. I grew up very happy in the U.S., didn't really see much point in traveling outside of the U.S. But when I met Paul and traveled to England and lived in England for 3.5 years, it actually, God used it to open my eyes and help me to see the wonderful differences that there are culture to culture.
Yeah. Given that we all allegedly speak the same language.
Yeah. Even though words are spelled differently and confusingly in some cases. Sorry?
It's a funny business, English language.
It really is.
Did you come to England to live as part of the visa requirements, or was that before?
I did. I came to England just to stay with Paul while we were engaged, and stayed with his parents, and everything. And planned our wedding from England. But when we got married, we'd been looking into, well, where do we go? Do we live in England for a time, or do we live in America? Very quickly boiled down to the fact that we had to live in England, because the U.S. visa laws are that you have to, for Paul to come over here, we would have had to known each other for, I think it's 2 years, like in person, be in the same area 2 years before we even got engaged. Get engaged for another year, and then he could have his spouse visa to be in the U.S. England was a lot simpler. to get my spouse visa for England. All we had to do, we had a phone interview with a border agent, and we had to prove that we'd actually had the depth of our relationship before we got married.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was all of those emails that I was telling you about, we printed them off.
Mm-hmm.
We printed off all of the emails I received from Paul, and we printed off all the emails that Paul received from me. And they created 2 books, each about 3/4 to an inch thick. And then we sent them off to the border agent, and we think she just must have kind of looked at them, looked at the thickness, and flicked through to make sure there weren't any blank pages, and said, okay, they know each other, they love each other.
Yeah, it's not like the green card movie, is it, where they're trying to do it under the wire to just get him employment status.
And it just proved so much easier for me to move to England. And in the long run, as we look back on it, it actually was God's hand was on it. Mm. That was it wasn't just what was easiest and what worked the best for the 2 different governments. It actually was what God wanted, because there were certain aspects, like for the 10 years before I met Paul, my family had been reading the Quran, the Islamic religious book, because my dad had been sold the story of Muhammad had, at one point, he was in a cave and he received a visit from the angel Gabriel, who said, I have this message from God, write it down. Not having an actual relationship with Jesus, my dad fell for it. Mm. And so we'd been reading the Quran for 10 years. And there was just a lot of other smaller aspects of, because when I met Paul brought me to Christ. And when that happened, I had to, by moving to England, I was actually able to walk out of a lot of those bad belief systems, just a lot of the hardness and ungodly thoughts and everything that I'd had growing up. It was a good thing. It was God's hand on it.
Yeah. Who knew? He even has agents in the border agents control place.
Well, if God can control Pilate, I think God can control a border agent
border
too.
Control. Yeah, probably. And we met while you lived here.
Yes.
And we have woolly things in common, that's why.
Sorry?
And we have woolly related projects in common, that's why.
Yes, indeed. I remember sitting in church one day, and Paul always liked to sit in the very back row of the church, and you tended to sit on one of the sides further up. And I happened to notice this really neat hat. And I thought, you know what? That looks like it's handmade. I bet she knits. And I went and I talked to you, and you said, yes, I do knit.
Yeah.
And we started talking and became friends.
And this is a bought one, but in theory, I could have been wearing things that I have made for this interview. I didn't think about it. That's poor planning, isn't it?
It is. Same here.
Where would you travel if money was no object? If I was giving out free money that you had to spend in an airport, where would you go?
It's more a case of where wouldn't I go?
I hear you. Yeah.
Because one of the things that Paul and I have come to truly enjoy is enjoying different cuisine, and the different cultures. There are so many interesting aspects to different places and how how they use foods differently. There's while we lived in England, I saw a really curious cooking dish that I'd never seen before, and I didn't know what it was. It turned out it was a Moroccan tagine.
Oh yeah.
And so ever since then, I'd wanted one and wanted one and wanted one. And Paul finally gave me one for Christmas a couple years ago. And it is absolutely amazing. And one of our favorite dishes to make with it's Moroccan meatballs.
Oh.
And they're slightly different. They have more peppery, more paprika in them, and along with the tomatoes and stuff. And then the final cooking process, you actually crack some eggs into it.
Oh.
And let the eggs cook in with the meatballs. And it's really, really good.
Might need the recipe for that.
And then there are a few other meals with it that they make up with, like chicken. They combine meats like chicken and dried apricots, dried raisins, and olives and lemons.
Which seems like a strange combination, doesn't it, with apricots?
It does, but it turns out really flavorful. And so it's little things like that Paul and I would love. We've talked about this question many times. If we could, where would we go? And starting with Europe, even, there are just so many different types of foods to try and different ways of cooking it all that just are really fascinating.
So you're going on a cookery tour of everywhere then?
Pretty much.
Well, on a foodie related basis, what would you have as your last meal?
That is a really, really hard question for me to answer because my initial thought is, well, that depends on what I'm feeling like that day. And because of what I was thinking of when I wrote the answer down, I put down a meat pie.
Okay.
Because I grew up with, my mom made these amazing meat pot pies that were, it's not the English crust that is quite heavy and thick. It's a flaky crust.
Okay. And
that combined with whatever meat stew she had on hand, it just made a really, really warming, it's a winter dish. And it was just amazing. So, yes.
The thing I said when Charlotte interviewed me on this question was much the same. Not the pie, but something my mum made, which clearly is the same for you. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were little?
Well, when I was like around 10, I remember going through phases of thinking, I like singing. I want to be a singer. Or I like reading, so I want to write books. But as I got into my teen years, I came to, my mom was a homemaker, and she did homeschool me for a time, and I saw the blessings in those things, in being able to, because I experienced other families' homes where someone in the family didn't take the time to actually make the home comfortable, make the home a haven, someplace where the family wanted to be, wanted to stay and hang out. And there's an atmosphere, even if the home is well designed and looks pretty, there's still a difference. You can feel the difference because there's an atmosphere with a house that has somebody who cares about making things comfortable, about making a haven for their family. There's a warmth that is there. You may not even like the decor, but you can still feel this is actually a home.
Where they make Valentine's cookies. On the fly.
Yes, right. And so I wanted to be that. I wanted to. There was also, because of my few years of being homeschooled, my mom didn't feel she could homeschool me through high school, so she didn't. And I did go back into public school for my high school years. And because of that, I did experience more some of the challenges of public school. And that filled me with a desire to find an alternative to public school for my own kids. And which is good.
What job would you have been terrible at?
What did I write down?
Everybody so far that I've asked had an answer almost without having to think about it, whereas lots of the other questions they've had to sit and think deep, meaningful thoughts and stuff.
Interestingly, I didn't have an answer for this one automatically.
Right.
And
have you come to one in the end?
Maybe. Well, I have had a variety of jobs, and I have succeeded at all of them to some extent. Some better than others. I had a job sorting mail at one of the places in England for a time. And if I'd been at it longer than I would have, I'm sure I would have had some success. And I've had a job in a bakery, and I did well there. I've had a job as a church secretary. The hardest was the mail sorting job because it was just physically demanding.
Yeah.
The worst one was long-term was the bakery job, because I got to the point where I would come home and I did not want to go into the kitchen. I did not want to cook or do anything with food because I was dealing with it all day long, and it was not nice.
No, I can imagine.
I didn't want to stand over a hot stove when I had been already doing that near a oven bigger than I am all day long. And the most challenging job that I had that I persevered through and that God used to teach me a lot, even looking back, lessons I'm still learning, was the church secretary job, because I came to dislike it for reasons, because there were things that was just hard to manage at the time. It was a job that was calling me to give of myself more than I wanted to.
Right.
Because it's a ministry job. And ministry jobs, one of the problems that I had with it was that the boundaries were almost non-existent. And they became even worse when Paul actually became the pastor of the church, because then, and the boundaries between church secretary and pastor's wife were almost impossible to really find.
You're on call all the hours of the day, and I would imagine.
Yeah, and it was really, really rough. So that was probably one of the hardest aspects as well. And I suppose if I were to look at it in that light of, out of the jobs that I've had, which one would I least like to go back to? I think for boundaries' sake, it would be the church secretary job.
Yeah.
It's just really, really hard when you don't have those boundaries to be able to say, okay, that's the job. It stays there. It doesn't come home with me.
Yeah.
And this is now my family time.
Mm.
It helps if there's enough other people in the church willing to help maintain those boundaries. Because if the other people in the church are don't respect the boundaries, don't respect the need for the boundaries, then it is, in some ways, you're fighting an uphill and losing battle.
Yeah. Imagine you are standing in an ice cream shop. What flavour are you buying?
Mint chocolate, cherry, and caramel.
So far, everybody I've interviewed has said something different to the next person, and none of them have wanted mint choc chip. They all think it's revolting, whereas actually that's my favourite.
Yes, it's one of my favorites as well, and it's just, it goes so nicely with so many other things.
Mm. Clearly, it's an acquired taste.
Apparently.
But we like it. We like it. Imagine you are standing in a bookstore or a library. What shelf or department are you in?
Historical fiction, Christian, or homeschool.
Yeah, fair enough.
One of my favorite authors at the moment is a guy named Mel Starr, and he's a history professor for one of the universities in, like, Minnesota, I think. But his chosen section of history is English Middle Ages.
Oh, right.
And his character is a guy named Hugh Singleton, who is a bailiff at Bampton, which is not far from Oxford. And it's just the stories of that he goes through of learning, figuring out mysteries. Who killed this person? Who killed that person? And because of the time that it's set in, it's just really interesting. Kind of listening, because I have them on Audible, and kind of listening to the guy read about this and everything it's just really cool.
My dad likes detective novels that are set in like the Victorian period, so actually he might enjoy those, so I might look them up.
Yes.
If you wrote your own memoir, what would it be called?
Let's see. Learning to Trust God.
Righto.
That's something that I've realized over the years, that one of the main problems that we have as humans is struggling to trust God. Trust that He's faithful to do what He said, faithful to take care of us and provide for us, that He's faithful in whatever challenging situation we're in at the moment.
And he even works for the border control.
Yes, indeed.
If you owned a horse, what would it be called? Have you owned a horse? Because you're quite farmy, aren't you?
Yes, I did own. I've owned 2 horses.
Ooh.
One was a pinto. I don't know if that. I don't think they're actually called pintos in England. She was white and kind of a sandy brown color with a black tail.
Okay.
And black spots in her mane. And her name was Sweetie. And she was my absolute favorite horse. And then I owned another one who was a brown and black horse, and her name was Lady. So I've had two.
And if you had another one right this minute, what would it be called?
I can't answer that because I have to see the horse before I can figure out what name it would have.
It's a personal thing, righto. Fair enough.
Yep.
What makes you feel invincible or unstoppable?
Remembering that God is there. Because in me, I know I'm not invincible. But I know that God is, and that He can help me deal with any situation that comes.
If you could time travel, where would you go? Forwards? Backwards? Somewhere in particular?
I think I'd pick sometime in either the Bible times or medieval ages. Those have always been fascinating times to me.
I've not had a duplicate yet. Anybody I've asked, nobody is going with anybody else so far. Do you speak any languages?
I speak, obviously, English.
Obviously.
Yes. I speak a little bit of Spanish, enough to be able to, I'm trying to, every once in a while, we try to introduce some Spanish words, because we're so close to Mexico.
Yeah.
And we have, here in New Mexico, we have a huge Hispanic population. Mm. And 99%, not all of them, but 99% of them do speak Spanish. Probably 40% of them don't speak English.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a growing number of the Hispanic people in the area who either don't speak English or only speak a little bit. And so any communication with people like that is very broken and very challenging. Mm. And so it's something that Paul and I want our kids to have at least a little bit of ability to be able to speak with them. Mm.
What do you think is your biggest achievement?
I think probably the homeschooling. Mm. Because it's taken a lot of the knowledge that I got in my own schooling time, but also I've had to learn a lot. Because even trying to, when her first year of homeschool it did not go well. And which is why we tried public school for a year, mm-hmm. because there were certain things that I didn't understand how to teach, mm-hmm. how to help my kids learn and understand what I was trying to teach them, yeah. and how to make them do the work. And then the year that they had in public school gave me the opportunity to actually take a step back and figure out what had gone wrong and how I would do things differently, how I would do things better. Mm-hmm. And this is now our second year of our restart in homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And it's just a whole lot better, and there's a lot of, I'm still learning. That's one of the aspects, is that I'm still learning. And teaching my kids is forcing me to learn a lot more than I would have otherwise.
What would you like as a superpower?
Joy.
Okay. No spidey webs for Jane, just giving out of joy.
Yes.
Wow, that's a lovely
Give joy,
thing.
bring joy, Have joy.
Just joy everywhere.
Yep.
What's your biggest fear?
My kids drifting from God, drifting from us. This day and age, there are so many kids that, in their teen years, they drift away from away from the truth, away from who God is, away from their relationships with God. They drift away from their parents because there's developed such a huge communication problem between the kids and the parents and the parents a lot of the time seem unwilling to compromise, to look for how can I communicate this better. And Paul has a new position in a different church. He's actually the youth pastor in our new church. And so we're working with a lot of youth, and even these youth in the church we're seeing this with. And it makes us so sad that this is happening, because these kids, we see probably a third to half of the kids that we have in our youth group we know are going to walk away.
Yeah.
We're trying to sow seeds, but we can't do everything, and they're going to walk away because of the situation that they have at home.
It must be depressing beyond belief to know that going in, and you know,
it is.
At the end of the day, all you can do is sow the seeds and pray for them and send them on their way, I guess, and hope that they eventually come back.
It is, especially since a lot of these kids they're in their last year of public school, and because Paul's only been in the job for about coming up to 6 months, I think. Right. He's had to. There are things that he's not able to develop that relationship with them that he wants. So
today I am granting surprise days off. How would you spend the time? No housework allowed. What would you do with the time?
Go with my family and to go hiking someplace.
So an outdoor nature girl.
Yes. We went into the mountains last year for my birthday, and found a place that was it was really, really pretty, and we were surprised at just how much we all enjoyed it, and that's become one of our favorite things to do.
Nice. And last question for today: what do you like to have on pizza?
I actually like the spinach and mozzarella and tomato, just the basic, I forget what it's called, but that basic topping on the pizza. That's a really nice combination for me.
So sort of margarita, but with spinach.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Jane. Go and spread joy wherever you go, everybody. Take a leaf out of Jane's book. Go find some joy, if it's outdoors or indoors playing with balls of wool.
Yes, indeed.